What account? That's what I said to my daughter when she called me on Christmas morning and asked if the money her husband had been depositing every month was enough to cover my medication. I hadn't received a single dollar. My daughter had married Clifton 3 years earlier, in a ceremony I helped pay for, drained most of what remained of my savings to give her the wedding she'd always dreamed of. Back then, Clifton had a firm handshake and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I told myself I was being an overprotective father. 31 years as a forensic auditor teaches you to read numbers, not people. Or so I thought. My name is not important. What matters is that I'm 68 years old. I live alone in the house in Dayton, Ohio, where I raised my daughter after her mother passed. And for the past 4 years, I've been managing a degenerative spinal condition that costs more to treat than my monthly Social Security check covers. The gap gets filled by my modest pension from the accounting firm where I spent my career, by careful budgeting, and, supposedly, by my son-in-law. My daughter's name is Noelle. She's 34, warm-hearted in the way her mother was, and trusting in a way that I always admired and privately worried about. She married Clifton Sharp when she was 31. He came from money, family, and commercial real estate outside Atlanta, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had never truly needed anything. Within a year of the wedding, Clifton had convinced Noelle to move to Charlotte, where his business was headquartered. I understood. I smiled at the going-away dinner. I drove home alone and sat in the kitchen for a long time. The calls became less frequent after the move. Not dramatically. Noelle was attentive, thoughtful, but the visits dropped from monthly to quarterly, and then to holidays only. I told myself that was normal. People build their own lives. That's the whole point. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to suspect, was that Clifton had approached Noelle approximately 8 months after their move with what he described as a generous plan. He told her that he wanted to set up automatic monthly deposits to help cover my medical expenses. Said it was the right thing to do. Said he admired how I'd raised Noelle on my own, and that family takes care of family. Noelle told me this later, her voice breaking on the phone, and said she had believed every word. Why wouldn't she? He was her husband. He handled their finances. He had always, in her experience, been competent and precise with money. The account he set up was in my name, or rather it carried my name. The Mitchell Arden Care Fund, he called it. He told Noelle the deposits were going in every month. $1,200, which would have covered my co-pays, my physical therapy sessions, the prescription that cost $340 without insurance adjustment. Noelle assumed I was receiving it. She never asked directly because she didn't want me to feel like a charity case. She knew I had my pride. Clifton knew it too. He'd been banking on it. For 22 months, Noelle believed her husband was quietly, generously supporting her father. For 22 months, I was selling things, my old woodworking tools, my late wife's jewelry that I'd kept in a box on the closet shelf for 12 years. Eventually my truck, replacing it with a 12-year-old Civic I bought off a neighbor for $3,800. I told Noelle the truck had been giving me trouble. I didn't tell her what things actually cost me to keep upright and medicated and housed. I didn't want to be a burden. Christmas morning, Noelle called at 9. I was making coffee, had the small tree lit in the corner that I put up every year because her mother always insisted on a tree. Noelle asked if she and Clifton could video call later in the afternoon. I said of course. She paused, then asked, careful, gentle, whether the deposits had been covering everything or whether I needed Clifton to increase the amount. She said she'd been thinking about my next specialist appointment and wanted to make sure I had what I needed. I set down my coffee mug. I asked her what deposits she was referring to. The silence on the line lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Dad, she said slowly, the monthly deposits. Clifton has been sending $1,200 a month to your care account since February of last year. 22 months, $1,200 each. I did the arithmetic without trying. $26,400. Noelle, I said, keeping my voice exactly level, the same way I used to deliver audit findings to executives who didn't want to hear them. I have not received any money from Clifton, not $1. She didn't speak for a long moment. That's not possible, she said. Get me the account number, I said. The video call that afternoon was not what any of us had planned. Clifton appeared on screen beside Noelle, dressed in a Christmas sweater, a glass of bourbon in his hand. When Noel asked him directly to explain the Mitchell Arden Care Fund, something moved across his face. It was fast. A flicker of recalculation. Not guilt, exactly. More like a chess player suddenly aware the board had shifted. Your dad's confused, he said. We've been over this. The deposits go in automatically. Mitchell, check your statements again. You probably have a separate account you're not tracking. I've been a forensic auditor for 31 years, I said. Give me the account number and the routing information. He laughed, relaxed, almost affectionate, the laugh of a man who had never been caught at anything in his life, and therefore didn't believe this was the beginning of that. Pop, it's Christmas. We're not doing bank stuff on Christmas. Then we'll do it tomorrow, I said. Get me the account details. Noelle was watching her husband. I watched her watch him. I had spent enough years analyzing discrepancies to know when a number doesn't add up, and I could see her doing the same calculation I had done, slowly, reluctantly, against her will. Clifton changed the subject, talked about the Charlotte house, a renovation they were planning, the cost of marble countertops. Noelle was quiet. The call ended. She called back 40 minutes later, alone this time. Her voice was different. He left to go to his brother's, she said. I went into his office. Clifton keeps physical files for everything. It's one of his habits. He doesn't trust cloud storage. I found a folder labeled with your name. She was quiet for a moment. Dad, the account is in your name, but he's the sole authorized manager. All the statements go to a P.O. box in Charlotte. I'd found 22 months of them. I sat down. Is there anything in there showing money transferred to me? Any medical payments? No. Her voice was steady in the way people get when they're holding something very large, very carefully. There's a debit card attached to the account. The statements show withdrawals, regular ones, restaurants, a golf club membership. Something called Asheville Weekend. It looks like a resort. There are 3 of them. Charges at a jewelry store I don't recognize. I thought about my wife's jewelry in the box on the closet shelf, the box I'd emptied piece by piece over the past year and a half. Noelle, I said, don't confront him tonight. Let him come home thinking everything is normal. Dad, trust me on this. 22 months of statements means 22 months of evidence. Don't let him know we have it. The next 3 days were the most disciplined work I'd done since I retired. Noelle photographed every page of the statements and emailed them to me. I printed them at the library, $2.60 for the pages, spread them across my dining room table, and started building a timeline. It came back naturally, the way any skill does when it's spent decades in your hands. Withdrawal categories, dates, patterns, cross-references. The picture that emerged was not complicated. Clifton had deposited funds into the care account and then transferred them, in smaller increments, to a second account Noelle didn't know existed, a personal account in his name alone at a different bank. From there, the money went to what the statements described clearly: his golf club in Charlotte, 2 weekend getaways that I suspected were not with my daughter, a recurring charge at a wine merchant, and 8 separate jewelry purchases at a store called Hartwell & Sons on Providence Road. Not one medical expense. Not a copay, not a prescription, not a therapy appointment. Nothing. I called Noelle on the 3rd day and told her what I'd found. She was quiet for longer than was comfortable. The jewelry, she finally said. I've seen him come home with bags from that store. He told me they were gifts he was holding for a client. I didn't say anything. I need a lawyer, she said. So do I said. Get yours first. I found Priscilla Odom through the Ohio State Bar's referral service. She had an office on 3rd Street in downtown Dayton, 2nd floor of a building that smelled like old carpet and strong coffee. She was 50-something, direct, and spent the first 15 minutes of our meeting reviewing my printed documentation without speaking. When she looked up, she wasn't dismissive. You've already built most of the case, she said. 31 years of audit work, I said. Money always leaves a trail. She explained the legal framework. Because Clifton had established the account in my name and represented to my daughter that its purpose was my medical care, he had created a specific obligation. The funds were designated. Using them for personal enrichment violated Ohio civil law under unjust enrichment and potentially fiduciary breach if we could establish he had made himself the functional trustee of funds meant for a third party. She could also pursue conversion, unauthorized use of funds designated for specific purpose. What about criminal? I asked. She was honest with me. Difficult. He'll argue it was a marital account used for family purposes. He'll say your daughter had access and awareness. We need to prove specific fraudulent intent beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's a high bar when the money moved through a joint marital context. Civil, I said. Civil, she agreed. And you'll win. Her fee was $325 an hour. I looked at the number in my savings account, $4,201, the entirety of what remained after the past year and a half of selling things to cover the gap. Clifton's account was supposed to fill. I told her the number. She studied me for a moment. Contingency, she said. I take 30% of recovery. You pay $200 today as a retainer and cover filing costs. I'll front the rest. I wrote the check. My hand didn't shake, but I was aware of exactly how much was left after I did. What I didn't know, what Noelle hadn't told me yet because she was still processing it herself, was that Clifton had done something else. She called me that evening, and I could hear she'd been crying, though her voice had steadied by the time she spoke. I found something else in his office, she said, behind the filing cabinet, an envelope. Dad, there are documents in here, a quitclaim deed, for your house. I went very still. The property address is yours. My name is on it as grantee. But Dad, I didn't sign this. Someone signed my name. I asked her to read me the notary information. She did. The notary's stamp was from a public notary office in Charlotte. The signature that was supposed to be Noelle's was notarized 11 months ago. My house, the one I bought in 1991 for $87,000, the one where Noelle learned to ride a bike in the driveway and where her mother died in the back bedroom and where I had lived for 33 years. If that deed had been filed with the Montgomery County Recorder's office, ownership could have been transferred to my daughter without her knowledge, and then, as her husband Clifton would have had legal claim to it, as marital property in any divorce proceeding. It had not been filed. Whether Clifton lost his nerve or was waiting for the right moment, I didn't know. But the document existed, and the forged signature existed, and now I had both. I called Priscilla the next morning and told her about the deed. That changes things, she said. Forged notarization on a property transfer is criminal fraud that I can take to the Montgomery County prosecutor. Do it, I said. Clifton, meanwhile, had come home to Charlotte and apparently resumed his normal routine. Noelle had not confronted him. She was good at that, holding herself together outwardly while everything interior was shifting. She told me she started sleeping in the guest room claiming a headache, and that Clifton hadn't pressed the issue. He seemed, she said, completely unbothered, like a man who had done nothing wrong because he had never, in his own accounting, defined what he was doing as wrong. He called me on New Year's Eve. I didn't expect that. Mitchell, he said, his voice carrying that same relaxed confidence. Noelle tells me you've got some concerns about the account. I want to clear this up. I think there may have been a miscommunication about how the fund was structured. I let him talk. He explained that the account had been set up as an investment vehicle, that the deposits were growing, accruing interest intended as a reserve for future major medical costs. He said the withdrawals Noelle had seen were administrative fees and that I would, of course, receive a full accounting. I let him finish. Then I said very quietly, Clifton, I've spent 31 years finding exactly this kind of explanation and exactly this kind of paperwork. The money went to your golf membership, 2 resort weekends, a wine merchant, and 8 jewelry purchases at Hartwell & Sons. Would you like to explain which of those is an administrative fee? A long silence. You've been talking to a lawyer, he said. His tone had changed, still controlled, but the warmth was gone. Happy New Year, I said, and hung up. The next 6 weeks moved in the specific way that legal proceedings do, slowly in daily experience, quickly in retrospect. Priscilla filed the civil complaint on January 14th. Unjust enrichment, $26,400 plus interest. Conversion of designated funds. She simultaneously referred the forged deed to the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office, who opened a separate criminal investigation. Clifton retained an attorney in Charlotte. His response arrived 3 weeks later, and it was what Priscilla had predicted it would be. He claimed the account was a joint marital financial planning instrument, that Noelle had full knowledge and had authorized the management approach, and that I had no standing as a third party. He also included a declaration signed and notarized, this time legitimately, from his brother in Atlanta, who stated that I had spoken to him at the wedding reception and expressed that I didn't want to be a financial burden on my daughter, and that I preferred Clifton handle any support arrangements indirectly. His brother was not lying exactly. I had said something like that at the reception, the remark of an uncomfortable father trying to be gracious. Clifton had apparently filed it away for later use. Priscilla was not worried. He's built his defense on your pride, she said. We'll build ours on his receipts. Noelle had retained her own attorney in Charlotte and filed for divorce in early February. She petitioned for full financial disclosure of all accounts, which gave her attorney legal authority to subpoena Clifton's banking records. What came back was comprehensive. Beyond the Mitchell-Arden Care Fund, Clifton had 3 accounts Noelle had not known existed. One of them showed 2 years of regular transfers to a woman named in the statements only by initials, cross-referenced by her attorney with a Charlotte address that was not a business. Noelle called me the night she learned about that. She wasn't crying. Her voice was flat and deliberate, the voice of someone who has moved past the hurt into something harder and more useful. I want everything, she said. Then document everything, I said. Don't react yet. Let the process work. In March, Priscilla arranged for a deposition. Clifton appeared via video from his attorney's Charlotte office, cameras centered precisely, his expression confident and polished. He had clearly been coached. His answers were measured, his tone was patient, he spoke about me with a studied gentleness. My father-in-law's confusion, he said twice, with a small, sad headshake, designed to suggest that an older man had simply misunderstood the nature of a complex financial arrangement. Priscilla let him finish the prepared portion before she started asking about specific transactions. Mr. Sharp, the account statement for June of last year shows a withdrawal of $240 at a restaurant called Fig Tree in Charlotte. Can you explain how a restaurant charge constitutes medical care for Mitchell-Arden? A pause. That would be a working dinner. I was managing the account on behalf of the family. There are 4 similar restaurant charges in that month alone. Were all 4 working dinners related to managing Mitchell-Arden's medical fund? I'd have to review the specific. The same month shows a charge of $160 at a wine merchant on Selwyn Avenue. Is wine a medical expense? His attorney objected. Priscilla moved to the jewelry charges. By the time she reached the resort weekends, each one a Friday through Sunday charge with 2 room keys indicated on the billing details, Clifton's composure had developed visible cracks. His jaw was tight. He said, I have to review 6 more times. He contradicted himself once on the timeline of when he claimed, explained the fund structure to Noelle. Priscilla caught the contradiction and read it back to him from the transcript. He went quiet for a long moment. I'd like to take a brief recess, his attorney said. They came back 15 minutes later, and Clifton's answers were shorter, more guarded, and significantly less convincing. The criminal investigation moved on its own timeline. A detective from the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office called me in late March to take my statement. I met him at the prosecutor's office on West 3rd with a full copy of my documentation, color-coded, tabbed, chronological, the same way I had organized work papers for client audits my entire career. The detective, a quiet man named Osei, looked through the binder without expression, then looked up. You've done most of our preparation work, he said. Old habit, I said. The forged deed was clear enough. The notary in Charlotte, when contacted by Ohio investigators working in coordination with the Mecklenburg County DA's office, confirmed that she had notarized what she believed to be Noelle's signature, but had not verified identity beyond a driver's license she could no longer remember clearly. Clifton's fingerprints, pulled from documents in the Charlotte attorney's files where he was a named party, matched prints found on the original deed envelope. He was charged in April with forgery and filing a fraudulent real property instrument, first-degree misdemeanor in Ohio, under the circumstances with potential felony elevation depending on prosecutorial discretion and whether additional evidence of intent emerged. His Charlotte attorney added a criminal defense partner from a North Carolina firm. Noelle called me the evening she heard about the charges. She was quiet for a moment, then said, He sat at your kitchen table and ate dinner with you. He did, I said. He looked you in the eye. He did. Another silence. How are you not angrier than you sound? I thought about that for a moment. I've been angry, I told her. In the specific way you get angry when you understand exactly what happened and exactly why. Not the hot kind, but the cold kind that keeps you organized and focused and working. The kind that doesn't leak out into your voice, because you need it for something more useful than volume. The civil case settled in May. Clifton's attorney, faced with the deposition transcript, the financial documentation, and the pending criminal charge, advised settlement. The agreement, negotiated over 2 weeks, required Clifton to repay the full $26,400 plus 11% interest, calculated from the first unauthorized withdrawal, plus Priscilla's legal fees. Total, $31,840. It was not a dramatic number. It wasn't a judgment in the hundreds of thousands, but it was every dollar he had taken, plus the cost of taking it, and it would sit as a civil judgment of record attached to his name in Ohio courts for the next 10 years. The criminal case proceeded on its own schedule. Clifton ultimately accepted a plea agreement, 1 count of attempted filing of a fraudulent instrument, reduced from the forgery charge in exchange for a guilty plea, 18 months of probation, and a $500 fine payable to the Montgomery County Victim Compensation Fund. Not prison. I had understood from the beginning that it probably wouldn't be. The system works the way it works. What mattered to me was that the record existed, his name, the charge, the plea, public and searchable. Noel's divorce was finalized in July. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state. With the fraud judgment on record and the documentation of Clifton's hidden accounts, including the transfers to the woman in Charlotte, Noel's attorney negotiated a settlement that gave her the Charlotte house, her retirement accounts, and 60% of their joint savings. Clifton kept his family's real estate interests, which was separately held, and his car. He moved into an apartment in the south end of Charlotte. The jewelry from Hartwell & Sons, 8 pieces purchased over 22 months, was not recoverable as marital property once it was demonstrated that the funds used to purchase it came from the care account rather than joint marital funds. Noel petitioned successfully for the value to be offset from Clifton's share of the marital assets. She did not keep any of the pieces. She donated the cash value to a women's shelter in Charlotte. She told me that on the phone, and I had to sit down for a moment. Your mother would have done exactly the same thing, I said. I know, she said. That's why. By August, my dining room table was clear. The printed statements, the timeline, the color-coded binders, all of it boxed and stored in the closet where I used to keep my woodworking tools. I'd bought some of those back, actually. Found a decent set of chisels at an estate sale in Kettering for $40, and spent a Saturday afternoon in the garage, working on a small cabinet I'd started years ago and set aside. The work felt good, the kind of good that comes from making something real with your hands, something that holds together, something that will outlast the circumstances that interrupted it. Noel flew out in September. She came alone. No occasion, just a visit. She drove a rental from the airport and pulled into my driveway, and I watched her get out of the car. And I thought she looked more like her mother than she ever had. Something about the way she moved. Settled into herself in a way she hadn't been during the years of the marriage. We spent 3 days doing very little. I made her mother's pot roast recipe the first night. We watched movies. I showed her the cabinet I was working on, and she ran her hand along the wood the same way her mother used to, checking for rough edges. We drove out to Houston Woods on the second day and walked the trails for 2 hours, not talking much, watching the red tails circle above the lake. On the last evening, we sat on the porch after dinner. The neighborhood was quiet. The Millers across the street had their porch light on. Somewhere down the block, someone was running a leaf blower in the September dusk. I keep thinking, Noel said, about the moment you told me not to confront him. Christmas night, you said let him think everything is normal. You did it, I said. I wanted to call him out right then. I was shaking. I know. How did you know that was the right call? I thought about how to explain 31 years of following money through the places people try to hide it. The patience that comes from understanding that evidence, built carefully, is more powerful than any confrontation in the moment. When you catch someone, I said, you only get to catch them once. You don't spend that moment on anger. You spend it on documentation. She was quiet for a while. Dad, she said eventually, the settlement money, what are you going to do with it? I told her. The back medical bills, 18 months of co-pays and prescriptions I'd been deferring or partial paying, just over $4,400 in total. I'd settled those first, in full, the week the check cleared. The truck, I had found a used F-150 in good shape at a lot on Miamisburg Centerville Road. 48,000 miles, one previous owner, and I'd paid cash. I had money left, and I had a plan for it. There's a fund, I told her, for when you're ready to start over. For when you're ready to start over. Buy a house, start a business, take a year to figure out what you want. Whatever it is, it'll be there. She turned to look at me. That money was stolen from your health care, she said. It came back, I said. And you're my health care. You always have been. So it's going where it was always supposed to go. She didn't argue. After a moment, she reached over and put her hand over mine on the arm of the porch chair, and we sat like that while the streetlights came on one by one down the block. The leaf blower stopped. The neighborhood got quiet. I thought about the 33 years I'd lived in this house. The way it sounded different after her mother died. Too much room for one person. Echoes where there used to be noise. The years I'd spent keeping it up, keeping myself up, managing the cost of staying independent and upright and present for whatever time I had left. The year and a half I'd spent quietly selling pieces of my life to stay afloat, too proud to say anything, exactly the way Clifton had calculated I would be. Pride nearly cost me everything. What saved it wasn't confrontation. It wasn't anger. It was method. It was 31 years of following the paper trail, and a daughter who held herself together long enough to photograph 22 months of bank statements behind a filing cabinet in a home office on a Charlotte street she would never return to. The judgment sits in the Ohio court records. The plea is public record in Montgomery County. Clifton Sharp, who shook my hand at a wedding rehearsal dinner and told me I was gaining a son, will carry both of those records for the rest of his professional life. Background checks will find them. Business partners will find them. It is, as I told Priscilla the day we settled, enough. Not everything that should cost a person costs them in the way you choose, but something always costs. That's the part the Cliftons of the world never quite believe until it's too late. Noelle flew home the next morning. I drove her to the airport the same way I used to drive her to school. Early, quiet, radio low. She hugged me at the departure drop-off, longer than usual, and I held on too. Because at 68 you learn not to treat a hug like something that will always be available. I drove home the long way, took surface streets through the west side, past the old neighborhood where I used to take her trick-or-treating, past the library where she learned to use the card catalog before everything went digital. Pulled into my driveway and sat in a truck for a minute in the September morning. My house, paid for, clear-titled, mine. Same as it ever was. I went inside and made coffee and sat at the dining room table. Clear now, just a table again, and thought about what to work on next with the cabinet. The door fit wasn't quite right. It would take some patient fitting, some careful adjustment, taking material off a little at a time, until the thing sat the way it was supposed to. I had the time. I had the tools. I knew how to be patient. That's enough. I think about the moment I told Noelle not to confront him. Christmas night, her hands probably shaking, everything she believed about her marriage cracking open in real time, and I asked her to hold still, to wait, to trust the process over the feeling. That's the hardest thing I've ever asked another person to do, and the fact that she did it, that she held herself together long enough to photograph 22 months of bank statements behind a filing cabinet in a house she would never return to, that's not a small thing. That took something real. What Clifton built his scheme on was a correct observation. I'm a proud man. I was raised to handle my own problems, not announce them. He watched me at the wedding reception, heard me say I didn't want to be a burden, and filed it away. He understood that my sense of dignity was something he could use against me, and for 22 months he was right. I sold my tools, sold my late wife's jewelry, traded my truck for a 12-year-old Civic, and never said a word to my daughter because I didn't want her to worry. Pride without honesty isn't dignity. It's just a different kind of vulnerability. What I keep coming back to is this. Clifton was not stupid. He was organized, persuasive, patient. He set up the account correctly. He managed the paper trail deliberately. He knew exactly how families communicate, or failed to, and he exploited the gaps. What he lacked wasn't intelligence. It was the basic decency that keeps a person from looking their father-in-law in the eye and stealing from him for nearly 2 years. When you separate intelligence from integrity, you don't get a clever person. You get a capable predator. And capable predators eventually leave evidence. That's where 31 years of forensic audit work came in. I did not get angry in a way that burned my resources. I got methodical. I printed the statements, built a timeline, categorized every transaction in the same way I had spent my career doing for clients who were paying me to find exactly this kind of pattern. The skill I had spent decades developing turned out to be the exact tool I needed for the most personal case I would ever work. I think about that sometimes. About how the discipline you build doing hard things for other people comes back to you when you need it for yourself. And Noelle, she could have collapsed. She had every reason to. Her husband had been deceiving her for nearly 2 years. About money. About where he was spending it. About who he was spending it. About who he was spending it with. She had built a life around a person who had calculated, from the beginning, what he could take. Instead, she photographed the documents. She called her attorney. She held her position through depositions and motions and the long, slow grind of a legal process that doesn't move at the speed of pain. That kind of steadiness doesn't come from circumstances being manageable. It comes from a person deciding what they're made of when circumstances are not. The settlement money is sitting in an account with Noelle's name on it now. Every dollar of it. It was supposed to cover my medication. It still will. Just through her, the way it was always supposed to work. Clifton thought he understood how families hold together. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about a lot of things. What he never accounted for was that the man he was stealing from had spent a career following money to every place a person tries to hide it, and that the daughter he married had, somewhere along the way, become someone her mother would have recognized immediately. Some things you can't steal. That's worth remembering.